they've always seemed to be kind of different aspects of the same unit. They've always acted as one. Their mom insisted that when one won anything, they all shared equally, and that included the wife, of course. So they've always been seen as a single unit, the brothers. And and you can think of it in terms of, well, there are five of them. They are all individuals. They have different qualities and characteristics. Yudhishthira is the most pious. Arjuna is the best archer and perhaps the best warrior overall. Bhima is a great warrior. He's the strongest, and he's also probably the most emotional. And then the other two brothers are they're kind of forgettable, but they're all essentially individuals, but they all act as a single whole, tend to, or at least tend to. So it's really weird when here at the very end of the story, they're walking along and they start dying one after the other. Draupadi fell down, lifeless. They traveled on, and after some time, Sahadeva fell. Nakula fell next, then Arjuna. Then Bhima fell to the ground. One after the other, they're all dropping. And, you can always tell who's important in a story in a movie because they get a pretty moving death scene. But if somebody who just sort of dies and is like, well, okay, and they move on, that's not an important character. But here, these are all fairly important characters, and they're just gone, one after the other. And Yudhishthira is just wandering along. That's odd. Now, it's less odd when you think in terms of Hindu philosophy, where we have been told repeatedly throughout this work that attachment is not necessarily good. We should have a certain intellectual and spiritual remove from our emotions. We should keep our thoughts focused on the eternal things of life and not the worldly things, like personal relationships, like our emotions, which are generally considered to be weaknesses. And with that, of course, comes the belief in reincarnation, which we don't need to get into very much here. But if somebody dies in the Hindu spiritual framework, their soul just travels to a new host body of some form, and they take a different form, but they don't actually die. The body does, and that just sort of goes away. But that is of no consequence. The soul is always there, coming back eternally until, well, each time supposedly as a result of how good you were in the past life. Again, we don't need to get into all that. So it's not necessarily when somebody dies and you look at them lying there on the ground, you're not looking at them, you're looking at just the body that they have sloughed off. And their soul is already, somewhere else. So there's that in there also, that maybe we can, go a little easy on Yudhishthira and say, well, their bodies, they're old by now, they've been, they're significantly old. The bodies have probably been achy and cranky and difficult, as bodies tend to get with age. So now it's a happy thing that they have been released. Their souls have been released from that body that was just breaking down. And now they can go out and get a hot young model and, look good at the beach again. So there are those different things, but the text itself is very spare. It doesn't bring any of this stuff up. It seems to be relying on its readers at this point, And remember, at this point, you have been reading for a long, long time to get through this. It seems to be relying on its readers to have a sense of this, to have learned the consequences. But even so, the spareness of it is shocking. But think about what that does when we see, and this one died, and that one died, and that one died, and we're kind of taken aback, and we're sad. But in doing that, in confronting the coldness of the text, in relating to these characters, not just Yudhishthira's coldness, but the coldness of the text itself, we are demonstrating a kind of empathy, a kind of emotional attachment that the book seems to be, the poem seems to be holding as a fault. Each one of them is blamed when Yudhishthira reacts to it. The only reaction we get is that some version of, well, he was too much this. Bhima was too much of a glutton. Arjuna was too vain. They were too invested in their human emotions and their human desires to really mourn. Or maybe that's what killed them. Bhima was really quite the glutton, and sure, maybe you got to watch the diet when you get older. But that sense of comparative attachment, I think, is instructive, because we're being shocked in these little moments. It would have been very easy for the text to just spend a little bit of time with each one of them, maybe even give them like a whole chapter, who knows, but at least a few extra lines to honor these characters who have died after such a long span of time with them. The book is asking us, prodding us, more than asking us, honestly, prodding us to consider our own attachments, I would say. So you can't necessarily just judge Yudhishthira, at fault here. You have to reflect on your own reaction. You are not superior to the characters. You are one of them. You are being involved in this text. But then you get another wrinkle added to this, because as they're walking along the way, they pick up a dog. A stray dog just starts following them, which I think is great. It's just a memorable little detail that's just sort of fun. They're wandering along, and a dog, a stray, just starts following along too. Stray dogs will do that sometimes. And Yudhishthira, watches the wife, each one of his brothers, all fall down dead. And he just, all right, well, that's it. As he's walking along, the god Indra shows up and says, okay, we're going to take you up to heaven. Your brothers and your wife, they're all already there in spirit. You, because you are so good, you are such an exemplar of dharma, of duty, of piousness, and all of that, piety. You get to ascend in your full body, which is like the great honor. But we got to go now. And Yudhishthira says, no, wait, what about the dog? This mangy dog that's been following along. What about the dog? I won't go without the dog. And Indra is incredulous. Says, impossible. Heaven is no place for dogs, said Indra. You have won the supreme reward by your virtuous life. There is no sin in abandoning the dog. Dog lovers are cheering all over the place with that one. He watched his own siblings and his wife fall down dead. But this mangy, stray dog that just starts, ambling along behind them, maybe looking for cast-off scraps of food, this is the one he's going to value. This is the one that he's going to say, no, I can't leave that behind. Yes, all my intimate family members, I just sort of abandoned. I didn't even break my stride when they croaked. But this, I'm not going to abandon this dog that I met just the other day. I cannot do it, said Yudhishthira. It would be wicked to cast aside one who is so devoted from the selfish desire for the joys of heaven. But you have renounced all other ties, said the god. You left your wife and brothers lying on the ground. Why is this dog different? They are already dead. There was nothing more I could do for them. This dog is alive. To abandon him would be equivalent to the worst sins: slaughtering a woman, theft from a Brahmin, injuring a friend. I have never done such a sinful deed, and I never will. As long as I have breath, Indra, I cannot and I will not do it. So moral. The idea that the dog was alive, but there really was nothing to do for his brothers or his wife. And again, once the soul leaves the body is just, a worn out husk. Just leave it there. It's nature. Let, nature take its course. But the idea of life, the valuing of life over death, I think is important. But then something, genuinely miraculous, but also oddly curious happens in that the dog, of course, transforms into a god. Disguised as the dog, it had been following along, witnessing everything. And of course, it's not just any god, it's the god Dharma, who is the father of Yudhishthira. Remember the whole divine birth thing. And here, the god Dharma credits Yudhishthira for this compassion, specifically. He was delighted with his virtuous son. This compassion is a supreme example of your righteous mode of life. There is no one in all the world more virtuous than you. Compassion is suddenly valued. Translation, always dicey, but compassion, it seems to me, is a kind of attachment. It's a kind of emotionalism. Compassion means with passion, essentially. And hasn't the poem been arguing against so much of that? The idea that you should feel emotional attachment to something on earth, something as common and mundane and earthly as a dog. That seems to be shifting the entire argument. That seems to be qualifying in a way that hasn't necessarily been so clear before. The idea that strict adherence to detachment, to emotional idealism, focusing on the other world at the expense of this world. That's not enough. That a truer experience of piety, of Dharma, would be an embrace of some form of emotional attachment. It's validating our humanity as part and parcel of our divinity. The ideal realm, which we're all supposed to focus on, is here said to be only made complete by embracing our worldly natures as well. This is, I would say, a kind of a wrapping up. After this long poem, which is so much of an argument, arguing one way after the other, both sides of an argument, always taking things into consideration, thinking about different problems from different angles, and trying to come up with a mode of being in the world that exercises our best qualities and that gives us the greatest chance for heaven. After all of that, it seems to be a mix, because one group comes in and says, you got to forget about everything on earth. It's all about it's all about heaven. It's all about the ideal. It's all about the divine realm. You should just focus on that, and everything else doesn't matter. But against that, throughout, there's always been this pull to say, yeah, but we're all still human. We all still have resentments. We all still have passions. We all still have lusts. We all still have these human attributes that keep us on this level and at times overtake our divine aspirations. And ultimately, this comes out as a kind of mix. It's not necessarily one or the other. It's not all about the ideal, and it's not all about the worldly. The worldly without the ideal is just an animal. The ideal without the worldly is just empty space. This moment seems to me to be a lab test of that entire poem, bringing it all down to this one question. Can you achieve divine, ideal essence without your humanity? This is one of the most popular questions of the ancient world, I would say, but also of art in general, across all centuries and all cultures. Can we be ideal? Can we let go of our humanity and achieve a kind of ideal? Or does our humanity allow us to appreciate the ideal? A little later on, it will be explained to Yudhishthira that you cannot really achieve heaven until you have experienced a little hell. It's one or the other. Or it's not one or the other. You need to have an experience of one to appreciate the other. And if you're in hell and you have no idea what heaven is, it's just hell. It's not bad. It's the same reason some people like the subway. But it's the knowledge of the two that makes the full experience. And that sense of balance, that sense of not one thing or the other, but somehow one thing within the other, like a mandala, which we will get to when we get to China, that gives an instinct to compromise, to qualification, to the kind of blurring of distinctions that you see in a challenge to a social hierarchy. Because here the book is saying it doesn't all have to be about ideal. It can be about something physical and worldly as well. That is valued as well. Which is the same argument as warrior class people saying, all you Brahmins up on top, you're all focused on the ideal, but what value is of that? I can't really touch any of that. That's too abstract. We are not divine beings. We are all worldly animals in a sense. And we need a divine conception and social and social arrangement, social structure that allows for that. And from the warrior class's position, it's a very simple perspective, their worldliness makes heaven possible. So they can bring those two together. They're not arguing that the people beneath them necessarily need an awful lot more play in the world, but they're just seeking to crack open. The warriors are cracking open the tight monopoly on authority that the Brahmins have so far enjoyed.